All right, we are Section 4, Team 3. We are Ty, Mark, Brian, Megan, and I am Adam, presenting the case Cheater Cheater. If you'll recall, this was a case where a banking trade group puts on an educational program for banks where they train bank employees to be future leaders. And the manager of this educational program discovered two of her students had cheated and turned in some assignments that they'd used someone else's work as their own. So in this case, the manager is faced with the ethical dilemma of how to respond to this and what to do with these two students. And so we're going to analyze this situation through a couple different perspectives. The first perspective that we chose to look at was the deontological approach. Under deontology, it's very important that we treat everybody the same, that we have a universal application that applies to everybody. We don't make exceptions, we don't look at extenuating circumstances, we apply it universally. One of the important questions in this approach is, how do we treat this situation so everyone is treated the same? And if we do that, what are their implications? Would we be okay with this person being treated that way in every approach? And would we be okay if this person did this action, if everyone were allowed to do the same thing? What would that result in? So it's very clear in this situation that cheating is bad, and we wouldn't want everyone to cheat universally. So that's pretty easy. But as far as what we do to respond to that, under the deontological approach, we would analyze if we kick them out of the school, would that be the right approach under every circumstance, or if we look the other way? Okay, the next approach that we looked at was the ethics of care. We wanted to analyze the same situation from kind of an opposite framework. Under the ethics of care, one of the primary considerations is what would this do to the individual? What will be the repercussions if we treat this person this way? What will our feelings be? How will that impact our relationship? So if we analyze it from this perspective, we're going to put a lot of focus on the individual. Specifically, in this case, there was one individual who is a single mother, 2 children. She's the primary breadwinner for her family. Under this approach, we would spend a lot of time and give a lot of weight to the fact that coming down on her would have some serious consequences for that, and that would be something that would probably lead us to be a lot more lenient in this case, and maybe on a case-by-case basis show a lot of leniency. So the recommendations that came out of these two approaches: first, the deontological recommendation. We felt like if we did this, we would still want to have kind of a softened approach. Even if we were very universal in its application, we would want to care about the students. So even though we would, under this approach, expel them every time, we would try to do it softly. We wouldn't try to get them fired from their jobs. We would, in fact, try to help them so that wouldn't happen, but we would feel the need to take kind of a hard line there. Under an ethics of care recommendation, we would want to analyze some of those other circumstances and say we might want to be a little bit lenient here because of the following consequences. But we would, under any approach, want to make it clear going forward exactly what is tolerated and what isn't. So we felt like one important recommendation to come out of this, one learning takeaway, is we would want to be much more clear in the future and know exactly what is expected of our students, and have them even sign some kind of a pledge so they know what the consequences will be in the future, and that will help us to avoid this type of problem in the future. We reached out to several industry executives and people who have some experience, and they shared a few things that we'll highlight here that we hadn't thought about in our initial discussion. The first was a manager of a large insurance company that told us that from his perspective it really didn't matter that this assignment was ungraded. It was still an assignment, it was a required learning experience, and by not doing their own work, they robbed themselves of that learning experience, they cheated, and that raised a big red flag for him, and the fact that it was ungraded didn't make any difference to him. Another executive shared with us that in this industry, because it's banking, it's so important, the honesty, and any sign of dishonesty, he really felt like there could be no tolerance for. They have to come down hard in this situation because it's a banking industry. Honesty is everything. They have to be upfront with the banks, and so we felt like that was a very important consideration to take into consideration as well. Another one is this perspective where the individual shared with us that he thought that one of the important things would be for us to do our duty by merely reporting it to the banks, who are the employers of these individuals, and letting them make the ultimate decision. His perspective was, it's not our duty to worry about whether they get fired or not. That's up to the bank. We report it to the bank, we've done our duty to them, we do it every time consistently, but if the bank chooses to show leniency on them, and the bank would like them to stay in our program, that we ought to be willing to do that, because ultimately we serve the banks. So that was something that really shed some light on the situation for us. Finally, we talked to a philosophy student, and he shared kind of a philosophical approach. He ended up citing on the ethics of care perspective. We thought it was interesting that his ultimate recommendation was very similar to the previous one, that because of the care, he didn't want to kick people out of the program automatically, but he thought we should report it to the banks, and then the banks could make that decision, and we should, if the banks were willing to show leniency, we should as well. So we took all these into consideration. We came up with our final recommendation, and that is really a deontological approach, but we feel like it's a very practical approach as well that's fair. First of all, we feel like universally any circumstance of cheating or dishonesty we need to report to the banks. Without exception. That's the deontological approach. We treat everybody the same, and whatever consequences come from that come. But we want to let the employers make the ultimate decision about ultimately whether they still continue to be employed, or if they are employed, if they want to continue in the program. And if they're okay with it, we are. But definitely going forward, any second offense will result in kicking the individual out of the program, and we feel like it's very important to make that clear. And that, again, is universal. We apply it across the board. So really, our final recommendation is we use a deontological approach, but we take into consideration the ethics of care as well, and we feel like that's a fair and practical solution to this. So we hope you enjoyed our presentation. Thank you.